Hey guys, the vegan foodie girl here, and today we're going to make a batch of sourdough bagels. These are actually a lot easier than you think. They use normal flour that you can get from the supermarket. They freeze really well, but most important, they are delicious. So let's get started. For our sourdough bagels today, we are going to need about 750 grams of flour, just normal supermarket flour. You don't need fancy bread flour or high protein flour. This is just plain old wholemeal flour from the supermarket. We're going to need 10 grams of salt, just table salt is absolutely fine. We are going to need about 335 grams of just room temperature water and either an extra 2 tablespoons of water or 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. If you like a sweeter bagel, then by all means use maple syrup. I like a sourdough bagel, so I just use extra water. We are also going to need 200 grams of recently fed sourdough starter, so you can see it's nice and bubbly. We want to start by combining our water and our sourdough starter. We're going to gently mix these just to make sure that the starter is mixed evenly through the water, but you don't want to blend it on high speed. You just need to gently mix it. You can, of course, just do it with a spoon. Once you have combined your water and your sourdough starter, we're going to pop in our salt. I'm going to pop in all our flour. Now this needs to be kneaded until it's sort of smooth and pliable. You can do it by hand just on the bench top, but I prefer just to use a food processor. In my Thermomix, I knead it for between sort of 6 and 10 minutes. So I'm going to pop this onto knead and then I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Now that our dough has finished kneading, we're going to get that out. We're just going to form it into a ball and then we're going to pop it in a bowl and we're going to rest it for about 20 minutes before we separate it into 10 sections. Once it's in a nice little ball, we're going to pop it into a bowl and cover it with either a wet tea towel or some cling wrap, and we're going to set it aside for 20 minutes to rest before we come back and we separate it into 10 little bagels. Our sourdough bagel dough has been resting for about 20 minutes now, and what we want to do is we want to divide it into 5 equal portions. You don't need to be too specific, but I always just pop mine on the scales, see what the total is, roughly divide it by 10, and that's the size of each of the balls I'm going to make. So we've got about 1,298 grams, so about 129 grams for each of the balls that we're going to make. Literally going to pull some off. That's way too much, I can tell just by feel. And we're going to make each of our dough balls roughly 129 grams. $128, 130, that'll do. Way too much, I can tell by feel. Once we've weighed out our balls, we're literally going to stretch across the top of the ball, push in the back with our fingers, then sit him on the bench and make him into a nice ball. This is increasing the tension across the top of the bagel, and then we're going to sit it aside. Do the same with the rest of our dough balls. So stretch him across the top, push him in on the back, sit him on the bench. Make sure he's tucked in nice and tightly. If you have to pick him up and give him a bit of a squeeze, do that. And then make sure it's in a nice little ball. So we're going to cover them with the Glad wrap that we used to cover them before. We're going to pop a timer on. And we're going to sit them aside for 10 minutes just to rest once more. When the dough balls are resting, it's time to get a couple of trays ready. So all we're going to do is we're going to line a couple of trays with baking powder, and then we're going to sprinkle them with lots of flour. I find the easiest way to do it is just to sift the flour on, but you can just chuck it on with your hand or whatever you choose. But we want to have these ready before we start shaping the bagels. So just lining them with baking paper and then chucking some flour over the top. Now it's time to shape our dough balls. I'll move those trays aside. So we're going to take one of our balls, we're going to flatten it like a pancake, then we're going to roll it towards us and we're going to roll it into a sausage shape. Then we're going to flatten one end, we're going to wind the other end round, fold it over, joining those ends, and then we're going to pop him on the baking tray. Take your ball, flatten it, roll it towards you, roll it into a sausage, flatten one end, roll the other one around and fold it over the top. Now we want to keep a decent hole in the centre of our bagel, and that's because these are going to go nice and fat and puffy, and we don't want that hole to close up. Take one of our bowls, flatten it, roll it towards you, roll it into a sausage shape, flatten one end, roll the other side over and squish them together. And we're going to continue doing that for all the balls. Once our shaped bagels are on the floured trays, we're going to cover them with a tea towel and we're going to sit them somewhere warm for a few hours. It could be anywhere, depending on the temperature in your kitchen, between 1 and 4 or 5 hours. What we want to see them do is get to about 1.5, double the size that they are now. We want to see them go nice and puffy, and when we push on them, we want to see them spring back quite quickly. So I normally just cover mine with a tea towel. If it's a warm day, I leave them sitting on the bench in the kitchen. But if it's a bit cooler like it is today, I just pop them in the oven just with the oven light on, and that's enough warmth for them to sit for a few hours, proof away and increase in size. So I'll set a timer for a couple of hours, I'll check them. If they've proofed and they've risen and they're springy to the touch, then it just means I'll pop them in the fridge overnight so they can develop a nice sour taste before boiling and baking them tomorrow. If they haven't proofed long enough, if they haven't risen enough, if they're not sort of puffy looking, then I just leave them somewhere warm for a little bit longer until they are, before I pop them in the fridge. Hey guys, we're back the next morning. Our bagels have been resting in the fridge and it's time to cook them. We're going to start by popping the oven onto about 230, 240 degrees, and we're going to pop some water on to boil. What you may not know is that bagels are boiled briefly before baking. That gives them that lovely skin and that chewy texture. Into that water, we're going to add about a teaspoon of brown sugar and a teaspoon of bicarb. Give that a bit of a stir around, and then you want it on a nice fast boil. Here are our bagels out of the fridge. We're going to be boiling them and popping them straight back on this tray, and that's also the time that you put any toppings on that you like. You want to take a bagel and you want to gently slide it into your boiling water and give it a bit of a stir. I do about 2 or 3 bagels at a time, and then we need that to come back to a boil. Keep giving them a stir, keep giving them a bit of a flip, and we want to cook them for about 10 to 15 seconds each side. So after about 15 seconds, flip your bagels over and give them another 15 seconds. As soon as we take them out of our pot and pop them back onto our tray, that is when you need to put your toppings on. You want the moisture that's on top of the bagels to help your toppings stick. You can use poppy seeds, sesame seeds, or some everything bagel seasoning. They've had about 15 seconds on the other side now. So I'm going to take them out. you'll notice that they're much bigger than before we put them in the boiling water. While that's coming back to a boil, I'm going to sprinkle on my seasonings. And then we're going to pop in the last two from this tray. And then this first tray is going to go straight into the oven, and they're going to cook for about 12 or 15 minutes. Just remember to rotate the trays halfway through. Now this second tray is going to go into the oven. Once again, about 15 minutes. You'll be able to tell when they're cooked because they'll be golden brown and puffy. Our first batch of bagels has been in there for about 15 minutes. They're golden brown. We're going to get them out and then we're going to pop them on a cooling tray. Yum. Now they're going to be really hot to touch, so I recommend you take them off with tongs. You can leave them on there for a few minutes to cool down, but I prefer to take mine off and pop them onto a cooling tray. There's nothing quite like a fresh bagel for breakfast. Once you have all the bagels on a cooling rack, let them sit and cool for a few hours. They can keep for quite a few days if stored in a bread bag, somewhere out of direct sunlight. Otherwise, pre-slice them, store them in the freezer, and get one out and toast it whenever you get a bagel craving. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video, guys. If you have, please give it a like and subscribe, and I'll see you back in the Vegan Foodie Girl kitchen next time.